The contract in front of him was worth $2 billion. Lee Dong-wook's signature would seal the largest merger in DW Group's history, cementing his position as Seoul's most powerful CEO. But as he held the Mont Blanc pen, a gift from his late adoptive mother, his hands trembled, not from nervousness about business, from emptiness. "Sajang-nim, the board members are waiting," whispered Kim Ji-hoon, his secretary, adjusting his glasses nervously. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 52nd floor, Seoul stretched below like a circuit board of ambition. At 47, Dong-wook had conquered every mountain the corporate world could offer. Yet tonight, watching other couples through the glass at yet another charity gala, he realized he had built an empire on quicksand. 3 hours later, he abandoned his own merger celebration. The tuxedo was replaced by jeans and a simple white shirt, clothes that felt foreign after decades of Armani suits. He needed to feel human again, to walk among people who didn't know the DW Group logo, who wouldn't bow and call him Sajang-nim with calculated respect. In the crowded streets of Myeongdong, between street vendors selling hotteok and tourists taking selfies, he finally breathed. Then fate collided with him literally. Lost in thought at a crosswalk, he didn't see the traffic light change. The impact was soft but decisive. She stumbled. He instinctively caught her. Curly hair brushed his face. Vanilla scent invaded his senses. Maya Johnson, 38, architect from Los Angeles, tourist with a crumpled map and a smile that would haunt his dreams. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," she said in English, and he answered in the same language, his accent polished from years of international negotiations. She didn't know who he was. She didn't recognize the face from Forbes' Korea covers. To her, he was just a kind Korean man who helped when she needed it. But what Maya didn't know is that this collision would change both their lives forever, and that the man holding her hand was about to risk everything he had built for the one thing money could never buy. If you believe that true love can overcome any social barrier and want to discover whether a Korean billionaire and an American architect can defy an entire society's expectations, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring international love stories that prove the heart knows no boundaries. Maya studied the crumpled map in her hands, her architect's precision frustrated by Seoul's labyrinthine streets. 3 days into her solo trip, a therapeutic escape after discovering Marcus's betrayal, and she still felt like Alice in a neon-lit wonderland. The divorce papers were signed. The life she'd built in Los Angeles was in ruins. But Korea felt like a blank canvas, where she could rediscover who Maya Johnson really was. "Excuse me, do you speak English?" she asked a passerby, who smiled apologetically and hurried away. The language barrier felt like a protective cocoon. Nobody here knew about her failed marriage. Nobody looked at her with pity. That's when she collided with destiny. The man who caught her had gentle eyes that seemed to carry their own weight of sadness. His Korean accent was barely noticeable when he said, "Are you hurt?" "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention." No, it was totally my fault," Maya laughed, brushing off her sundress. "I was staring at this map like it held the secrets of the universe. I'm Maya, by the way. Maya Johnson." "Dong-wook," he replied, and she noticed he hesitated slightly, as if wanting to add something more. "Let me buy you coffee to apologize. There's a good place nearby. Traditional, not touristy." Something in his voice made her accept. Maybe it was the way he didn't look at her with the awkward curiosity she'd grown accustomed to as a black woman in homogeneous spaces. Or perhaps it was how he seemed as lost as she felt, despite clearly being local. But neither of them knew that Park Sung-min's photographer was already documenting everything from across the street, waiting for the perfect shot that would soon turn their innocent meeting into front-page scandal. The cafe Dong-wook chose was hidden in Insadong's winding alleys, where wooden hanok houses defied the glass towers of modern Seoul. Maya fell in love immediately. Low tables, cushions on the floor, the aroma of freshly ground beans mixed with traditional incense. "This place has been here for 40 years, Dong-wook explained, ordering in rapid Korean. My mother brought me here when I was young." Maya caught the hesitation. "Your mother?" "Adoptive mother. She passed away 5 years ago." His fingers unconsciously traced the rim of his coffee cup. She taught me that the best relationships happen in simple places, away from complications. I understand complicated. Maya wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. I just got divorced. Found out my ex-husband was cheating with his business partner. 10 years of marriage down the drain because I wasn't exciting enough for his taste. Dongwook looked up sharply. Any man who would betray you doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. The intensity in his voice surprised them both. Maya felt a flutter she hadn't experienced in years. When was the last time someone defended her with such conviction? "What do you do?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. Another hesitation. "Business. Import and export. Nothing too exciting." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth, but the alternative, revealing he was one of Korea's most powerful men, would change everything. For the first time in decades, someone was talking to him as just Dongwook, not the CEO of DW Group. "And you? Besides being an architect who gets lost in Seoul?" Maya laughed. "I design sustainable buildings back home. Nothing as grand as these." She gestured toward the window, where traditional architecture mixed with glass modernity. "But I love creating spaces where people feel safe, at home." Something shifted in Dongwook's chest. When was the last time he felt at home anywhere? But what Maya couldn't see was Kim Ji-hoon frantically calling his boss's phone from the DW Group building, where a $2 billion contract awaited a signature that wouldn't come tonight. "So you've never tried Korean barbecue?" Dongwook couldn't hide his mock horror as they walked through Myeongdong's busy night market. 3 hours had passed like minutes in that cafe, and neither wanted the evening to end. "I'm embarrassing myself as a tourist, aren't I?" Maya grinned, dodging a group of teenagers taking selfies. Back home, Korean food meant the place on Wilshire Boulevard that probably wasn't even Korean. "This is a cultural emergency. Come." He guided her toward a small restaurant where the ajumma behind the counter beamed at them with grandmotherly approval. As they sat at a low table, Dongwook ordered in Korean, his formal business tone replaced by something warmer, more playful. Maya watched him interact with the restaurant owner, respectful, kind, but clearly comfortable in a way that suggested this wasn't an act for her benefit. "You're not really import-export, are you?" she asked suddenly. Dongwook's chopsticks paused midway to his mouth. "What makes you say that?" "Your hands. They're soft, like someone who works at a desk. And that watch..." She nodded toward his wrist, where his Patek Philippe caught the restaurant's warm light. "That's not exactly what I'd expect from someone in shipping." Panic fluttered in his chest. "I do well for myself." "I'm not interrogating you," Maya said gently. "We all have things we'd rather not discuss with strangers. God knows I've got my share of secrets." The relief in his eyes was palpable. Here was someone offering him space to be incomplete, imperfect. When was the last time someone had given him that gift? As they shared kimchi and bulgogi, Maya told him about her architecture projects, her voice lighting up when she described designing a community center in East LA. Dongwook found himself leaning forward, fascinated by her passion for creating spaces that serve people rather than profit. "And you?" she asked. "What made you choose business?" The question struck deeper than she realized. How could he explain that at 25, he'd chosen corporate success over family tradition, earning Madame Choi's devastating rejection? How could he tell her that every deal, every merger, every billion one earned was an attempt to fill a void that kept growing larger? "Sometimes we choose our paths," he said finally. "Sometimes they choose us." Maya recognized the weight in those words. The same weight she carried from her failed marriage, from years of compromising herself for someone else's vision of who she should be. But neither of them noticed Park Sung-min's associate photographing them from across the street, documenting every shared laugh, every moment of unconscious intimacy that would soon weaponize their innocent connection. Kim Ji-hoon found them by accident, or perhaps by the GPS tracker he'd discreetly activated on his boss's phone when Dongwook disappeared from the merger celebration. The secretary's heart nearly stopped when he saw the CEO of DW Group sitting on a floor cushion, laughing with a foreign woman as if he were any ordinary Seoul resident. "Sajang-nim," Ji-hoon said quietly, approaching their table with the careful respect drilled into him by Korean corporate hierarchy. The joy drained from Dong-wook's face instantly. Maya watched the transformation with architectural precision. The way his shoulders straightened, how his expression became carefully neutral, the sudden distance in his eyes. "Maya, this is my associate, Kim Ji-hoon. Ji-hoon, Maya is a tourist from America." Ji-hoon bowed politely, but Maya caught the tension. Something was wrong. "Nice to meet you," she said in her careful Korean phrases, earned from 3 days of guidebook study. "The merger documents," Ji-hoon said in Korean, keeping his voice low. "The board is asking questions." "Not now," Dong-wook replied in the same language, his tone carrying the authority that made grown men in $1,000 suits tremble. Maya understood none of the words but everything about the dynamic. This wasn't a business associate. This was someone who worked for Dong-wook. And from the deference in the younger man's posture, worked for someone very important. "I should probably head back to my hotel," Maya said, gathering her purse. "Early morning tomorrow. I'm visiting Gyeongbok Palace." "Wait." Dong-wook's hand brushed hers, sending electricity up her arm. Would you like company? I could show you around, if you're interested." Something in his voice, vulnerable, hopeful, made her nod. "I'd like that, a lot." As they exchanged phone numbers, Ji-hoon watched with growing alarm. In 15 years of working for Lee Dong-wook, he'd never seen his boss look at anyone the way he was looking at this American woman. And in Korean corporate culture, where every relationship could become a liability, this felt like watching his employer walk toward a cliff. But Maya felt like she was finally walking toward sunlight after months of emotional winter. What she didn't realize was that the man whose gentle touch still warmed her hand controlled more wealth than some small countries, and that tomorrow's palace visit would begin a love story that would challenge every rule of Korean society. Maya's hotel room at the Loda in Myeongdong felt too small for her excitement. She'd traveled to Seoul to forget Marcus and rediscover herself, but instead found someone, entirely unexpected. Dong-wook's smile haunted her thoughts as she tried to sleep, along with that moment of tension when his colleague appeared. The next morning, she chose her outfit carefully, a flowing midi dress that felt both respectful and confident. Korean fashion seemed to balance tradition with modernity, and she wanted to honor that while staying true to herself. Dong-wook was waiting by Gyeongbok Palace's main gate, looking effortlessly handsome in dark jeans and a white button-down. The casual clothes transformed him from the mysterious businessman into someone who could be hers, if she were brave enough to imagine it. "Ready for 500 years of Korean history?" he asked, and she noticed he seemed more relaxed than last night, as if sleep had resolved whatever tension his colleague brought. As they walked through the palace grounds, Dong-wook proved to be an unexpectedly knowledgeable guide. He told her about the Joseon dynasty, with the passion of someone who genuinely loved Korean culture, not the rote memorization of tourist facts. "This pavilion," he said, stopping beside a delicate wooden structure reflected in a serene pond, was where the queen held her morning meetings with court ladies. She believed that important decisions should be made in beautiful places, surrounded by peace. Smart woman. Maya pulled out her sketchbook, rapidly capturing the pavilion's elegant lines. Architecture isn't just about function, it's about how spaces make people feel. Dong-wook watched her draw, mesmerized by the focused intensity on her face. "You make it look so easy." 20 years of practice. My dad always said I saw buildings before I saw people. Maya looked up, realizing how personal she'd become. "Sorry, I tend to ramble about work." "Don't apologize. It's beautiful, watching someone talk about their passion." He gestured toward her sketch. "You've captured something I've walked past hundreds of times, but never really seen." The compliment warmed her more than the morning sun. Marcus had always changed the subject when she talked about architecture, calling it shop talk. Having someone genuinely interested in her thoughts felt revolutionary. But as they sat on a bench overlooking the palace courtyard, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Keisha in LA. "How's the healing going? Found any handsome Korean men to distract you from Marcus's bullshit?" The reminder of her recent divorce sobered her. Here she was, developing feelings for a man she'd known for less than 24 hours. Was she rebounding, using Dong-wook to fill the hole Marcus left? And what did she really know about him beyond his kindness and mysterious business dealings? What Maya didn't know was that across town, Park Sung-min was reviewing the photographs from last night, planning how to use them to destroy the man who'd humiliated him 15 years ago in their last business partnership. And that her innocent healing journey was about to become the weapon that could bring down Korea's most powerful CEO. The photo appeared on kpopstars.com at 6 a.m. Seoul time. Mystery woman spotted with prominent Korean businessman. Maya was captured mid-laugh at the restaurant, Dong-wook leaning forward with unmistakable interest. The image was innocent but intimate, suggesting a connection that Korean netizens began dissecting immediately. By 7 a.m., Ji-hoon was pounding on Dong-wook's penthouse door in Gangnam, tablet in hand and panic in his eyes. "Sejang-nim, we have a problem." Dong-wook opened the door wearing only pajama pants, his hair disheveled from the first peaceful sleep he'd had in months. "What's so urgent that—" He stopped when he saw the tablet screen. "It's everywhere. Naver, Dispatch, even some international K-drama blogs. They don't know who you are yet, but it's only a matter of time." Ji-hoon's voice carried 15 years of protective instinct. "If they identify you as DW Group's CEO, and her as a foreign woman..." The unfinished sentence hung between them like a sword. In Korean corporate culture, a chaebol dating a foreigner, especially a Black American, would become national scandal. The stock price would fluctuate, board members would demand explanations, conservative shareholders might revolt. Dong-wook stared at the photo. Maya looked radiant, genuinely happy in a way that made his chest tight with unfamiliar longing. How did they get this? Unknown source. Professional quality, so not a tourist with a phone. Ji-hoon pulled up more images. Whoever took these knew what they were doing. As if summoned by their conversation, Dong-wook's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Good morning. Last night was amazing. Still thinking about that pavilion story." The simple message, so different from the calculated communications he usually received, made his decision for him. "Clear my morning schedule." "Sir?" "I'm meeting Maya at the palace." "And Ji-hoon?" Dong-wook's voice carried the authority that had built an empire. "Find out who took those pictures." At Gyeongbok Palace, Maya was sketching the changing of the guard ceremony when Dong-wook arrived, looking uncharacteristically tense. "Everything okay?" she asked, noting the rigid set of his shoulders. "There's something I need to tell you." He sat beside her on the stone steps, choosing his words carefully. "My work situation is more complicated than I let on." Maya's heart sank. Was he married? Did he have a girlfriend? Complicated how? But before Dong-wook could answer, a young Korean woman approached nervously. "Excuse me, aren't you the lady from the internet? The one dating the mystery man?" Maya's confusion was genuine. "I'm sorry, what internet?" The woman showed her phone screen, and Maya's world tilted. There she was, laughing with Dong-wook, looking like a woman falling in love. The Korean comments were indecipherable, but the tone felt ominous. "I don't understand," Maya whispered, looking between the phone and Dong-wook's pained expression. But what she was about to understand would shatter everything she thought she knew about the kind, mysterious man who'd made her feel alive again, and force her to confront whether their connection was real or just another lie in her series of romantic disasters. "We need to talk, privately." Dong-wook's voice carried an urgency that made Maya's stomach clench. They left Gyeongbok Palace quickly, ignoring the curious stares from other tourists who'd seen the viral photos. In his car, a modest Hyundai that seemed inconsistent with his expensive watch, Maya studied his profile as they drove through Seoul traffic. "Are you going to tell me what's really going on?" Dong-wook pulled into the parking lot of a small coffee shop in Hongdae, far from the corporate towers of Gangnam. The distance felt deliberate, like he was taking her somewhere his real world couldn't reach. "Before I explain about those photos, I need to know something about you." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Your divorce? How recent was it?" The question caught Maya off guard. Final papers were signed 6 weeks ago. Why? And you came to Korea alone to figure out who I am without Marcus, to heal. Maya's defensive walls rose automatically. Are you asking if I'm rebounding? If you're just some distraction from my failed marriage? I'm asking if you're capable of handling the truth about who I really am. The gravity in his voice scared her. Try me. Dong-wook took a breath that seemed to require courage. My name is Lee Dong-wook. I'm the CEO of DW Group, one of Korea's largest conglomerates. Those photos aren't just gossip. They're potentially front-page news that could affect thousands of jobs, billions in stock value, and my entire reputation. Maya stared at him. You're telling me you're like Korean millionaire famous? Billionaire? And yes. The parking lot suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. So when you said import-export, I lied. When I said I wasn't anyone important, I lied. When I let you pay for your own coffee yesterday, I lied. His hands gripped the steering wheel. But when I said I was falling for you, that was the first true thing I've said in years. Maya's architect mind processed the information in structural terms. Everything she thought she'd built with this man was constructed on false foundations. How do I know this isn't another lie? How do I know you're not just some rich guy who gets his kicks pretending to be normal with naive tourists? Because no one has ever made me want to be normal before. The raw honesty in his voice cracked something in her chest. But Marcus had been charming too, had made her feel special right up until she discovered his betrayal. I need time to process this, Maya said quietly. And I need to know, are there paparazzi following us right now? Dong-wook nodded grimly. Probably. Maya looked around the parking lot with new eyes. Any of those cars could contain photographers. Any of those people could be documenting her emotional breakdown for tomorrow's headlines. But what neither of them saw was Park Sung-min's sedan parked across the street, where he was personally overseeing the next phase of his revenge. The phase where Maya Johnson's presence in Dong-wook's life would become the weapon that finally destroyed his old business partner's empire. I need to show you something. Dong-wook's text arrived at Maya's hotel at 8 p.m., followed by another. If you still want to understand who I really am, meet me at Gyeongbok Palace's North Gate. Come alone. Maya stared at her phone. Every rational instinct screamed danger. Meeting a man she'd known for 2 days, who'd already lied about his identity, at a tourist site after dark. But her heart whispered something different. In all their conversations, she'd seen glimpses of someone desperate to be understood, not used. The palace was closed to regular tourists, but somehow Dong-wook had arranged private access. He waited by the North Gate wearing dark clothes, looking more like a midnight conspirator than a billionaire CEO. How did you... Maya began. Money opens doors, even doors that should stay closed. His smile was sardonic. Welcome to the privileges of the Korean elite. As they walked through the empty palace grounds, moonlight casting silver shadows on ancient stones, Dong-wook's voice carried through the night air like a confession. I was 22 when my adoptive parents died in a car accident. Madam Choi Hee-jin raised me after that. She's considered Korean high society royalty. She wanted me to preserve traditional culture, become a scholar, maybe run a cultural foundation. His footsteps echoed on the stone pathways. But I chose business instead. International markets, technology, everything she considered Western corruption of Korean values. Maya listened, hearing pain beneath his words. She disowned me for it. Said I'd dishonored everything she'd tried to teach me about what it meant to be Korean. They stopped beside the same pavilion where Maya had sketched yesterday. I built DW Group partly to prove her wrong, partly to prove I was worthy of something. But success without connection is just expensive loneliness. Is that why you've never married? Maya asked gently. Korean society expects men in my position to marry appropriate women, daughters of other chaebol families, arrangements that strengthen business alliances. His laugh was bitter. Love is considered a luxury, even a liability. Emotional vulnerability can be exploited by competitors. Maya felt pieces clicking together. Like Park Sung-min. Dong-wook's head snapped up. How do you know that name? I Googled you after this afternoon. Park Sung-min, SM Corporation, some kind of business rivalry that goes back years. She studied his expression. He's the one who leaked those photos, isn't he? The silence confirmed her guess. Maya, being with me puts you in danger you don't understand. Korean corporate warfare isn't just about money. It's about reputation, family honor, social destruction. Dong-wook turned to face her fully. If Park exposes our relationship, the media will dissect every aspect of your life. Your divorce, your race, your motivations for being with me. They'll paint you as a gold digger or worse. And you as what? A fool who let his heart compromise his judgment. Maya walked to the pavilion railing, looking out at the empty courtyard. So, what are you saying? That we should stop seeing each other to protect your image? I'm saying I'm 47 years old, and I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. But I'm also saying that choosing love over empire might cost me everything I've built. The weight of his admission settled between them. Maya understood she wasn't just being asked to date a man. She was being asked to enter a war where her very existence would be a weapon used against him. But what Dong-wook didn't tell her was that Park's plan was already in motion, and that tomorrow's headlines would force them both to make choices neither was prepared for. Park Sung-min's office on the 48th floor of SM Corporation commanded a view of DW Group's headquarters, a daily reminder of the humiliation he'd endured 15 years ago. The business partnership that ended with Dong-wook exposing his embezzlement had cost Park everything: reputation, marriage, his father's respect. Now, watching security footage of Dong-wook's midnight palace visit with the American woman, Park smiled for the first time in months. "Sir, the journalist from Seoul Economic Daily is here," his assistant announced. Kim Tae-sung entered, tablet loaded with photos and a hunger for the kind of story that made careers. "Mr. Park, the evidence you've provided is extensive. Lee Dong-wook thinks he's untouchable because of his corporate success," Park said, not bothering with pleasantries. "But Korean society still has standards. A chaebol CEO openly dating a foreign woman, especially an American black woman, will trigger every conservative instinct in our culture." The journalist scrolled through images, Dong-wook and Maya at the restaurant, walking through the palace, sitting intimately in his car. The public will certainly have opinions. More than opinions. Shareholders will panic. Board members will question his judgment, and I'll be positioned to acquire DW Group's assets when his empire crumbles. Park's voice carried 15 years of calculated revenge. At DW Group headquarters, Ji-hoon burst into Dong-wook's office without knocking, a breach of Korean corporate protocol that signaled emergency. Sejong Neem, Seoul Economic Daily is running a front-page story tomorrow. Billionaire CEO's foreign romance, love or corporate liability. Ji-hoon's hands shook as he handed over the advance copy. Dong-wook's blood turned to ice as he read the article. They had detailed his net worth, Maya's recent divorce, speculation about her motivations, and quotes from anonymous corporate insiders questioning his fitness to lead a major Korean company. How bad is this? The stock market will react immediately. Conservative shareholders are already calling for an emergency board meeting, and sir... Ji-hoon hesitated. They have photos from last night at Gyeongbok Palace. The private moment Dong-wook thought he'd protected was splashed across the newspaper like evidence in a trial. Maya's face in the moonlight, his hand touching her shoulder. The intimacy that felt sacred now exposed for public judgment. Find Maya. Warn her before this goes live. Dong-wook's voice carried the authority of a man who'd built empires, but his hands trembled as he reached for his phone. At the Lotte Hotel, Maya was finishing her morning coffee when her phone exploded with notifications. The hotel lobby suddenly felt hostile as guests began recognizing her face from their tablets and smartphones. "Miss Johnson." A young Korean woman approached with predatory friendliness. "I'm from KBS News. Could we get a statement about your relationship with Lee Dong-wook?" Maya's coffee cup clattered to the floor. The lobby spun as she realized every person was staring at her, some taking photos, others whispering behind their hands. But what Maya didn't know was that this was only the beginning, that Park Sung-min's war against Dong-wook would force her to choose between love and survival, in a country where her very existence had become a scandal. The headlines screamed from every newsstand in Seoul: Chaebol scandal, DW Group CEO's American affair shocks Korea. Maya's photo was everywhere. Walking with Dong-wook, sketching at the palace, even an old Facebook picture from her Los Angeles architecture firm that someone had somehow accessed. In her hotel room, Maya watched Korean news channels dissect her life with surgical precision. Though she couldn't understand the rapid Korean, the tone was unmistakably judgmental. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, bloggers, even what sounded like angry Korean citizens who'd somehow gotten her number. "Maya, don't leave your room." Dong-wook's voice on the phone carried exhaustion and desperation. "I'm sending Ji-hoon to get you. We need to move you somewhere safe." "Safe from what? I'm just a tourist who had coffee with a man." But even as she said it, Maya could see the crowd gathering outside the hotel through her 8th-floor window. "You're not just anything anymore. You're the foreign woman who seduced Korea's most eligible bachelor. You're the American who compromised a Chaebol's judgment. In conservative Korean society, you represent everything they fear about Western influence." The words hit Maya like physical blows. "I didn't seduce anyone. I didn't even know who you were. The media doesn't care about truth. They care about narrative. And the narrative is that you're either a gold digger or I'm having a midlife crisis that's compromising shareholder value." Maya sank into the hotel room chair. "My sister called from LA. The story made international news. My firm's phone is ringing with reporters asking about my secret relationship with Korean royalty. I'm getting you out of Seoul." "No." Maya's voice surprised her with its strength. "I won't run from this. I came to Korea to rediscover who I am, not to hide from racist bullshit in another country." The silence on the phone stretched until Dong-wook spoke quietly. "Do you have any idea what you're choosing to fight?" Maya looked out at the crowd below, at the photographers with telephoto lenses, at the conservative protesters holding signs she couldn't read, but whose anger was universal. "I'm choosing to fight for the right to fall in love with whomever I want." But across town, Park Sung-min was already implementing Phase 2 of his plan. The phase where Maya's courage would be tested beyond anything she could imagine, and where Dong-wook would have to choose between his empire and his heart in front of the entire nation. 20 minutes later, Ji-hoon arrived at the hotel's service entrance with a black van and 2 bodyguards. As they spirited Maya away from the media circus, she caught a glimpse of herself on the lobby's television screen and realized she was no longer Maya Johnson, architect from Los Angeles. She was now the American woman who'd brought scandal to Korean high society, and nothing would ever be the same. The phone call came at dawn. Madame Choi Hye-jin's voice carried across the line with the authority of 7 decades, and the cold precision that had made her Seoul's most feared social arbiter. "Dong-wook, come to the house, now." The Choi family estate in Gangnam existed outside time, traditional architecture maintained with obsessive precision, gardens that had been manicured for generations, rooms where Korea's most powerful decisions were made over tea ceremonies that looked simple but carried the weight of empire. Dong-wook hadn't been inside these walls since the day Madame Choi disowned him 25 years ago. Now, walking through hallways lined with ancestral portraits, he felt like the scared young man who'd once begged for her approval. "Sit." Madame Choi gestured toward a floor cushion across from her traditional tea table. At 71, she remained formidable. Silver hair pulled into an elegant bun, hanbok in muted grays that somehow managed to look more expensive than any Western designer dress. The tea ceremony proceeded in silence. Every movement carried meaning in Korean culture. The temperature of water, the selection of cups, the rhythm of pouring. Dong-wook waited, remembering lessons about patience and respect that this woman had beaten into him decades ago. "You have brought shame to everything I taught you about being Korean." Madame Choi's first words cut like traditional blades. Sharp, precise, intended to wound. "Helmoni, please let me explain. You will address me properly." Her eyes flashed. "I am Madame Choi to you. You forfeited the right to call me grandmother when you chose Western business over Korean values." Dong-wook bowed his head. "Madame Choi, I understand you're disappointed, but..." "Disappointed?" She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. The entire Korean corporate world is questioning your fitness to lead. Conservative shareholders are demanding your resignation. The woman is black, American, recently divorced. Everything our society considers inappropriate for a man in your position. Her name is Maya, and she's the first person in 25 years who makes me want to be better than my bank account. Sentiment. Western nonsense that compromises judgment. Madame Choi poured tea with movements that remained elegant despite her anger. I raised you to understand that personal desires must serve social stability. Your marriage should strengthen Korean culture, not challenge it. Like your marriage did? The cup in Madame Choi's hand paused mid-raise. In the silence, Dong-wook realized he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. You know nothing about my marriage. I know you married grandfather for political alliance, not love. I know you spent 40 years in an arrangement that looked perfect from outside, but felt empty within. Is that what you want for me? Madame Choi set down her cup with deliberate control. What I want is irrelevant. What Korea needs is leadership that respects our values. And what if our values are wrong? The question hung between them like heresy. In traditional Korean society, questioning cultural values was tantamount to treason against ancestors, against the social harmony that had sustained the nation for millennia. But what Madame Choi didn't tell Dong-wook was that hidden in her private study was a photograph, herself at 25, laughing with the American soldier during the Korean War, the love she'd sacrificed for duty and social expectations. And what Dong-wook didn't know was that his rebellion was forcing her to confront the choices that had defined her entire life. The DW Group board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. But by noon, protesters had gathered outside the glass headquarters in Gangnam. Conservative groups held signs demanding Korean values first, while international supporters countered with love has no borders. The scene looked like a cultural war using a billionaire's love life as the battlefield. Inside the 42nd floor boardroom, 12 of Korea's most powerful businessmen waited with expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed hostility. These were men who'd built fortunes on traditional hierarchies, who viewed social stability as the foundation of economic success. Dong-wook-si, began board chairman Kim Min-ho, using the formal honorific that created distance. The shareholders are concerned. Stock price dropped 8% yesterday, added Director Park Jae-won. International media attention is making our corporate partners nervous. Dong-wook stood at the head of the conference table, looking out at the protesters below. Are we discussing business performance or social prejudice? We're discussing leadership judgment, Kim Min-ho said carefully. A CEO's personal choices affect corporate stability. Your relationship raises questions about cultural sensitivity, strategic thinking, long-term planning. My relationship raises questions about racism, Dong-wook replied, turning to face the board. Are we seriously suggesting that DW Group's success depends on the skin color of my girlfriend? The word girlfriend landed like a bomb. In Korean corporate culture, admitting emotional attachment was viewed as weakness, vulnerability that competitors could exploit. It's not about race, Director Lee Sang-min insisted. It's about appropriateness. Korean chaebols have responsibilities beyond personal satisfaction. Responsibilities to whom? To shareholders who profit from our success? To a society that would rather maintain comfortable prejudices than confront uncomfortable truths? The boardroom fell silent. Several directors shifted uncomfortably. Dong-wook was challenging fundamental assumptions about Korean corporate culture, about the balance between individual desires and social expectations. There's another option, Kim Min-ho said quietly. End the relationship. Publicly apologize for the distraction. Marry an appropriate Korean woman within 2 years. The media cycle will move on, stock prices will recover, and your leadership will be unquestioned. Dong-wook stared at the 12 men who held his corporate fate in their hands. Men he'd known for decades, whose children he'd watched grow up, who'd celebrated his business successes at countless company dinners. And if I refuse, then we'll be forced to consider leadership alternatives. The threat was veiled, but clear. Even in Korea's hierarchical culture, board members could remove a CEO if corporate interests demanded it. Dong-wook's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Whatever happens today, I want you to know. Loving you has made me braver than I thought possible." The message gave him strength he didn't know he needed. "Gentlemen, I've built DW Group into one of Asia's most successful corporations. Our international expansion, our technological innovations, our philanthropic initiatives, all of this happened under my leadership. Are you really willing to sacrifice proven corporate success for social conformity?" But what Dong-wook didn't know was that Park Sung-min had already approached 3 board members with acquisition offers, promising them executive positions in a restructured SMDW conglomerate. The battle for his company was being fought on multiple fronts, and Maya had become the perfect weapon to turn his own board against him. Maya's hands shook as she packed her suitcase in the safe house Ji-hoon had arranged, a modest apartment in Hongdae, far from the media circus that had consumed her life. 3 days of constant scrutiny had stripped away every illusion she'd held about international romance and cultural acceptance. "I can't do this anymore," she told Dong-wook over video call, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "The photographers followed me to a coffee shop yesterday. They're calling my mom in Detroit, asking about my pattern of failed relationships. Korean blogs are analyzing my college photos, for Christ's sake." Dong-wook's face on the screen looked haggard. The board meeting had lasted 4 hours, ending with an ultimatum. Choose the company or choose Maya. "I'm trying to find a way through this that doesn't destroy everything." What if there isn't a way? Maya set down her folded clothes and stared directly into the camera. "What if loving me costs you your life's work? My life's work means nothing if I can't share it with someone who matters." The words should have made her heart soar. Instead, they felt like chains. "That's not fair, Dong-wook. You can't put that kind of responsibility on me." "What responsibility?" "The responsibility of being worth your sacrifice." Maya's voice broke completely. "I came to Korea to heal from one man who made me feel like I wasn't enough. I can't stay and watch another man lose everything because I'm too much." On the screen, Dong-wook's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "Maya, this isn't about you being too much. This is about a society that's not ready for change." Same result, different excuse. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've booked a flight for tomorrow night. I'm going home." "Don't do this. Don't let them win." "Win what?" "This isn't a game, Dong-wook. This is real life with real consequences. Your employees depend on you. Your company supports thousands of families. How can I ask you to risk all of that for a woman you've known for a week? Because in that week, you've shown me what it feels like to be alive." Maya closed her eyes, trying to memorize his voice, his face, the way he made her feel seen and valued. "And you've shown me what it feels like to be loved. But sometimes love isn't enough. It has to be enough. Not in this world. Not with these stakes." Maya reached for the laptop to end the call, then paused. "I love you, Lee Dong-wook. I love you enough to save you from choosing between me and everything else you love." She closed the laptop before he could respond, then sat on the floor of the anonymous apartment and cried for the dream they'd built and the reality that was tearing it apart. But what Maya didn't know was that her departure would force Dong-wook to make the most radical decision of his life, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what actually matters. The airport looked like a war zone. Incheon International's departure terminal buzzed with photographers, journalists, and curious onlookers who'd come to witness the American woman's retreat from Korean high society. Maya sat in the VIP lounge Ji-hoon had arranged, watching planes take off through floor-to-ceiling windows and wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Her phone had been turned off since morning. The constant calls from media outlets, from her architectural firm, from friends back home who'd seen the international coverage, had become unbearable. The only person she wanted to hear from was the one person she couldn't talk to without losing her resolve. "Miss Johnson?" A young Korean woman approached nervously. "I'm sorry, Park from Seoul Daily. Could I ask you a few questions before you leave?" Maya looked up, recognizing the hungry expression of a journalist sensing career-making story. "No comment. People are saying you're running away because the relationship wasn't real, that you were only interested in Mr. Lee's money." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Maya had endured a week of character assassination, but hearing it directly felt different. People can say whatever they want. I know the truth. And what is the truth? Maya considered the question. What was the truth about falling in love with a billionaire CEO while recovering from divorce? What was the truth about finding connection with someone whose world was so different from hers that their very relationship became international news? The truth is that love is complicated enough without adding billions of dollars and cultural prejudice, Maya said finally. The truth is that sometimes protecting someone you love means letting them go. At DW Group headquarters, Dong-wook stared at his computer screen displaying Maya's flight information. Departure at 11:47 p.m. on Korean Air Flight 012 to Los Angeles. 7 hours to decide whether to let her leave or fight for something that might destroy everything he'd built. Sir? Ji-hoon entered without knocking, a practice that had become routine during this crisis. The board has called another emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Chairman Kim is drafting your resignation letter. Let them draft whatever they want, Dong-wook said, without turning from the screen. I'm going to the airport. Sejangnim, if you make a public scene at Incheon, the media coverage will be devastating. Stock prices will plummet, shareholders will revolt, and the board will have everything they need to remove you immediately. Dong-wook finally turned to face his secretary, his closest friend, the man who'd protected him through 15 years of corporate warfare. Ji-hoon, what would you do? If it were your wife, if the woman you loved was walking away to protect you from your own choices, what would you do? Ji-hoon adjusted his glasses, a nervous habit that emerged only during the most difficult moments. I would probably do something very stupid and very romantic and very Korean. Like what? Like the grand gesture that proves love matters more than social expectations. Like the sacrifice that demonstrates commitment beyond words. Like the choice that forces everyone else to decide what they really believe about love and acceptance and change. Dong-wook stood, reaching for his coat. Call the media. Tell them Lee Dong-wook will be making a statement at Incheon International Airport tonight at 11 p.m. Sir, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But what neither of them knew was that Park Sung-min had already leaked information about Maya's departure flight to maximize media coverage, planning to humiliate Dong-wook one final time as his empire crumbled. The airport confrontation would be broadcast live, forcing both Maya and Dong-wook to make their choice in front of the entire world. The scene at Incheon International Airport was unprecedented. News crews from major Korean networks, international correspondents, social media influencers, and hundreds of curious citizens gathered in the departure terminal like witnesses to a cultural moment that would define modern Korea's relationship with tradition and change. Maya sat in the first-class lounge, 30 minutes before boarding, when Ji-hoon appeared beside her table. Miss Johnson, please don't get on that plane. Maya looked up from her untouched coffee. Why not? Because my boss is about to do something that will either be remembered as the most romantic gesture in Korean corporate history, or the most expensive mistake a chaebol has ever made. Before Maya could respond, every television in the lounge switched to breaking news coverage. There, walking through Incheon's main terminal surrounded by security and journalists, was Lee Dong-wook. Not the polished CEO in $1,000 suits, but a man in jeans and a simple white shirt, looking simultaneously terrified and determined. Oh God, Maya whispered. What is he doing? The press conference was hastily arranged near Gate 12, close enough to Maya's departure gate that she could see the crowd gathering from the lounge windows. Korean reporters shouted questions in rapid succession, while international media documented what was clearly a pivotal moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Dong-wook began in English, his voice carrying through the terminal's sound system. I am Lee Dong-wook, CEO of DW Group. I've called this press conference to address the speculation about my personal life and to make a statement about the future. Maya's heart stopped. Was he about to publicly apologize for their relationship? Announce his engagement to an appropriate Korean woman? Save his empire by sacrificing their love? 3 weeks ago, I met an American architect named Maya Johnson. She was lost in Seoul with a tourist map, trying to find her way through a city that probably seemed as foreign to her as authentic emotion has seemed to me for the past 25 years. The terminal fell silent, except for camera clicks and the distant sound of flight announcements. Maya didn't know who I was. She didn't care about my net worth, my corporate title, or my social position. She treated me like a human being who was worth getting to know, not a balance sheet to analyze or a connection to exploit. In the lounge, Maya pressed her hands to the window, tears streaming down her face. Korean society has taught me that a man in my position should choose a wife who enhances corporate stability, who represents traditional values, who fits comfortably into established social hierarchies. But Korean society has also taught me about loyalty, honor, and fighting for what matters most. Park Sung-min watched from his office across town, realizing his plan was backfiring in ways he couldn't have predicted. Today, the board of DW Group gave me an ultimatum. Choose the company or choose love. And I realized that a company built on the foundation of denying love isn't worth preserving. Maya gasped, understanding what he was about to do. Effective immediately, I am resigning as CEO of DW Group. I am liquidating my personal assets and establishing a foundation for international cultural exchange, because I believe Korea's future depends on opening our hearts to the world, not closing them in fear. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted follow-up questions. Shareholders watching on television probably panicked. And somewhere in Gangnam, Madame Choi was either horrified or secretly proud. But Dong-wook wasn't finished. Maya Johnson, if you're watching this, I love you. Not because you're convenient or appropriate or safe, but because you make me want to be the man I was always meant to become. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that some things matter more than empires. The terminal security announced final boarding for Korean Air Flight 02 to Los Angeles. Maya looked at her boarding pass, then at the television screen, where the man she loved was sacrificing everything for her, then at Ji-hoon, who was watching her with hopeful expectation. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you decide whether love is worth the risk, Ji-hoon replied. And suddenly, Maya knew that the architecture of her life had been rebuilt entirely in the space of 3 weeks. Park Sung-min's office fell into chaos as his carefully orchestrated revenge collapsed in real time. The stock market was reacting, but not as he'd predicted. DW Group's shares dropped initially, then began climbing as international investors saw opportunity in a company led by someone brave enough to choose love over social conformity. "Sir, the acquisition offer," his assistant began nervously. "Is worthless now," Park snarled, watching Dong-wook's press conference on 3 different news channels. "He's not destroyed. He's become a folk hero." Social media exploded with our love over empire hashtags. Korean millennials praised Dong-wook's courage. International audiences celebrated the romantic gesture. And even some conservative voices admitted grudging respect for a man willing to sacrifice everything for principle. But Park Sung-min hadn't spent 15 years planning revenge only to watch it crumble in a single afternoon. If public humiliation wouldn't work, more direct methods would have to suffice. At Incheon Airport, Maya stood at the gate, boarding pass trembling in her hand. Through the windows, she could see Dong-wook still surrounded by reporters, still answering questions about love and sacrifice and the future of Korean corporate culture. Final boarding call for Korean Air Flight 02 to Los Angeles. Maya looked at Ji-hoon, who was watching her with an expression that somehow managed to be both desperate and respectful. "If I don't get on this plane, what happens?" "I honestly don't know," Ji-hoon admitted. "My boss just gave up a multi-billion-dollar empire for love. We're in uncharted territory. And if I do get on the plane, then he'll probably spend the rest of his life wondering if he made the right choice." Maya closed her eyes, thinking about Marcus, about the divorce that had brought her to Korea, about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago who was afraid to trust her own heart. That woman would get on the plane. That woman would choose safety over risk, would protect herself from potential pain by avoiding potential joy. But that woman had never been loved the way Dong-wook loved her, completely, recklessly, without calculation or reservation. "Ji-hoon, can you get me through security?" "To where?" "To your boss." Ji-hoon's smile could have powered the entire airport. The crowd parted like water as Maya walked through Incheon's departure terminal, Ji-hoon clearing a path with quiet authority. Every camera turned toward her. Every reporter recognized the woman at the center of Korea's most talked-about romance. The clicking of photography equipment sounded like rainfall as she approached the makeshift press conference area. Dong-wook was mid-sentence, explaining his decision to establish the Cultural Foundation, when he saw her. The words died in his throat. The sophisticated CEO who could command boardrooms and negotiate billion-dollar deals was suddenly just a man staring at the woman who'd changed everything. Maya? She stood at the edge of the press area, aware that hundreds of people were watching, that this moment would be broadcast around the world, that whatever happened next would define not just their relationship, but their entire future. "You missed something in your press conference," Maya said, her architect's voice carrying clearly through the terminal. "What did I miss?" "You forgot to ask me what I wanted." The crowd held its breath. Korean reporters exchanged glances, unsure whether this was romantic drama or cultural catastrophe. International media sensed the kind of moment that becomes viral within hours. Maya walked closer until she stood directly in front of Dong-wook, close enough to see the hope and terror warring in his eyes. 3 weeks ago, I came to Korea to figure out who I was without my ex-husband. I thought I needed to be alone to heal, to rediscover my independence. Her voice wavered slightly, but she continued. What I found instead was a man who made me braver than I thought possible, who made me want to fight for love instead of running from it. Dong-wook reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Lee Dong-wook, you just gave up everything you built to prove you love me. But you should know, I fell in love with the man who bought me coffee and listened to my stories about sustainable architecture. I fell in love with someone who made me feel seen and valued and worth protecting. The silence in the terminal was complete. I don't need you to sacrifice your empire for me. I just need you to choose us, whatever that looks like. Dong-wook's response was barely a whisper, but the microphones caught every word. Are you staying? I'm staying, but not as the American woman who caused a scandal. I'm staying as Maya Johnson, architect, who fell in love with Lee Dong-wook, human being, and who's brave enough to build something new together. The kiss that followed was captured by dozens of cameras and would become one of the most watched moments in Korean social media history. But for Maya and Dong-wook, the world disappeared into a single point of connection that felt like coming home. But across town, Park Sung-min was already implementing his final, most dangerous plan, one that would test whether their love could survive not just social pressure, but actual physical threat. The media circus at Incheon had transformed into something resembling a celebration. Korean Air delayed Flight 012 by 30 minutes to accommodate the international attention, understanding they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered in Korean corporate history. Passengers pressed against terminal windows to watch the real-life drama unfolding in the departure area. Maya and Dong-wook stood in the center of it all, hands clasped, fielding questions from reporters who seemed genuinely invested in their love story, rather than just hunting for scandal. "Miss Johnson, what made you decide to stay?" asked a correspondent from CNN International. "Love isn't supposed to be easy," Maya replied, surprised by her own confidence. "But it's supposed to be worth fighting for. And this man is worth fighting for. Mr. Lee, do you regret resigning from DW Group?" This from a Korean business reporter, who looked like he was documenting the end of an era. "I regret waiting 47 years to prioritize what actually matters," Dong-wook answered. "Building a company is an achievement. Building a life with someone you love is a legacy." Ji-hoon watched from the sidelines, fielding calls from board members, shareholders, and media outlets around the world. The resignation had sent shockwaves through Korean corporate culture, but the public response was overwhelmingly positive. Social media campaigns supporting interracial love were trending. Young Koreans were sharing stories of their own cross-cultural relationships, and several major companies had issued statements supporting workplace diversity. "Sajang-nim," Ji-hoon approached carefully, using the old honorific out of habit. "I have updates from the office. I'm not CEO anymore, Ji-hoon, just Dong-wook." "Right. Dong-wook C. The board has agreed to your terms for the Cultural Foundation. Your personal assets are being liquidated as requested, and legal has drawn up the foundation charter. Maya squeezed Dongwook's hand. Are you sure about this? Giving up everything you've built? I'm not giving it up. I'm transforming it into something better. He turned to address the reporters still gathered around them. The Lee Johnson Foundation for International Cultural Understanding will promote cross-cultural education, support international students studying in Korea, and provide grants for artistic collaboration between Korean and international creators. The name hit Maya like a physical blow. Lee Johnson Foundation? If you'll let me. If you'll help me run it. Maya felt tears threatening again. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a divorced architect, running from her failures. Now she was being asked to help reshape Korean corporate philanthropy with a man who'd literally given up billions for love. I don't know anything about running a foundation. I don't know anything about loving someone this much. We'll figure it out together. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by Ji-hoon's phone ringing urgently. His face went pale as he answered, spoke briefly in rapid Korean, then hung up with hands that were visibly shaking. We need to leave. Now, Ji-hoon said quietly. Why? Dongwook asked. Because Park Sung-min just leaked your home address to every news outlet in Seoul. But more importantly, he's hired private security to protect his interests regarding the DW Group transition. They're not looking for a conversation. Maya felt the celebration drain away as quickly as it had begun. What does that mean? It means, Dongwook said grimly, that choosing love over empire made us targets. And Park Sung-min is done playing games. The airport suddenly felt less like a site of romantic triumph, and more like the opening move in a war that was far from over. The safe house in Gangnam felt like a bunker. Ji-hoon had arranged round-the-clock security after Park Sung-min's hired men were spotted outside Dongwook's penthouse and Maya's former hotel. Korean corporate warfare had escalated beyond media manipulation into something that felt genuinely dangerous. I can't live like this, Maya said, pacing the small apartment's living room. Hiding from hired thugs because I fell in love with the wrong person's business rival. Dongwook sat on the couch, laptop open, reviewing legal documents that would finalize his break from DW Group. It's temporary. Once the foundation is established and the corporate transition is complete, Park won't have any leverage. How do you know that? The question hung between them. Dongwook closed the laptop, recognizing the fear in Maya's voice. Not fear of physical danger, but fear of a future defined by other people's hatred. I don't know that, he admitted. I've been operating on faith that love is stronger than vengeance, that doing the right thing eventually wins. But I'm 47 years old, and I've spent most of those years believing that money and power could solve any problem. Maya sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but far enough to study his profile. What if Park never stops? What if this becomes our entire life? Security guards and safe houses and looking over our shoulders? Then we'll face it together. That's not an answer, Dongwook. That's a hope. Before he could respond, Ji-hoon entered with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent Korean. Maya had learned to recognize the tone, if not the words. Crisis management, damage control, the language of people trying to prevent disaster. What now? Dongwook asked when Ji-hoon hung up. Madam Choi wants to see you. Both of you. Tonight. Maya felt her stomach drop. The woman who disowned you? The one who thinks I'm everything wrong with Korean society? She says it's urgent. And she specifically requested that Miss Johnson accompany you. Ji-hoon's expression was unreadable. She's waiting at the family estate. Dongwook stood. Decision made. We go. Absolutely not, Maya said. Walking into that house sounds like the perfect way to end up as casualties in a 25-year-old family feud. Maya, Madame Choi is many things. Traditional, unforgiving, ruthless in her protection of Korean cultural values. But she's not violent, and she's not stupid. Dongwook held out his hand. If she's asking to see us together, it's because she has something to say that could change everything. Maya looked at his outstretched hand, at Ji-hoon's worried expression, at the security monitors showing armed men patrolling outside their building. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap. that walking into the mansion of a woman who'd already rejected Dong-wook once was asking for humiliation at best, danger at worst. But the same instincts had told her to get on the plane to Los Angeles, to run from love instead of fighting for it. And those instincts had been wrong. "If this gets us killed," Maya said, taking his hand, "I'm haunting you for eternity. If this gets us killed, I'll deserve it." What none of them knew was that Madame Choi had spent the last 3 days watching the international coverage of their love story, remembering her own sacrificed romance, and making a decision that would either redeem 25 years of regret or destroy the last remnants of her social standing forever. The Choi family estate looked different at night. Traditional lanterns illuminated the pathway through gardens that had been maintained for generations, creating shadows that seemed to hold the weight of Korean history. Maya walked beside Dong-wook through courtyards where decisions about the nation's future had been made over tea ceremonies and formal negotiations. Madame Choi waited in the main reception room, dressed in a formal hanbok of deep blue silk that somehow managed to look both ancient and timeless. At 71, she remained formidable. Silver hair arranged in an elaborate traditional style, jade jewelry that caught the lamplight, an expression that revealed nothing of her intentions. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing toward floor cushions arranged around a low table set for tea. Maya followed Dong-wook's lead, attempting the respectful posture she'd observed in Korean dramas, aware that every gesture was being evaluated according to standards she barely understood. The tea ceremony proceeded in ritual silence. Madame Choi's movements were precise, elegant, weighted with significance that Maya could feel but not interpret. The only sounds were the whisper of silk against silk, and the gentle percussion of ceramic on wood. "You have made quite a spectacle," Madame Choi said finally, addressing Dong-wook in English, a gesture that included Maya in the conversation, rather than excluding her through language. "I have made a choice," Dong-wook replied carefully. "The same choice you made 25 years ago. Individual desire over social responsibility." Maya felt the tension in the room thicken. This was the conversation that had broken their relationship decades ago. The fundamental disagreement about tradition versus personal freedom that had defined both their lives since. "With respect, Halmoni," Dong-wook used the intimate honorific deliberately. "Social responsibility that requires denying love isn't social responsibility. It's social control." Madame Choi's cup paused halfway to her lips. "You address me as grandmother. You forfeit that right. I've forfeited many things lately, but I've gained something more valuable." The older woman's gaze shifted to Maya, studying her with an intensity that felt like judgment rendered visible. "And you, Miss Johnson, what have you gained by destroying a Korean family's harmony?" The question was clearly a test. Maya recognized the setup: accept blame and appear weak, reject blame and appear arrogant. In Korean hierarchical culture, there might not be a correct answer for someone in her position. "I've gained the courage to believe I deserve love that doesn't require me to disappear," Maya said quietly. "And I've learned that harmony built on silence isn't really harmony at all." Something shifted in Madame Choi's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "You speak boldly for someone who understands nothing of our culture." "I understand enough to know that every culture evolves or dies. And I understand that Dong-wook's love for me doesn't diminish his love for Korea. It expands it." The silence stretched until Madame Choi set down her teacup with deliberate precision. 47 years ago, I was in love with an American soldier. His name was James Morrison from Ohio. He was kind, intelligent, handsome in the way that made Korean girls forget their upbringing. Her voice carried no emotion, but her hands trembled slightly. My parents forbade the relationship. Korean society demanded I choose duty over desire. So I married a man I respected, but never loved. Spent 4 decades in an arrangement that looked perfect from outside, but felt empty within. Maya's heart stopped. Dong-wook stared at his adoptive mother, as if seeing her for the first time. "James wrote me letters for 10 years after I married. I kept them all, hidden in a box that I look at every year on the anniversary of our last meeting. I have wondered every day for 47 years what my life would have been if I had chosen love over approval." Madame Choi stood, walked to an antique cabinet, and returned with a small wooden box that looked ancient and well-handled. These are James's letters. Love letters that I was too afraid to honor, too weak to fight for, too concerned with social expectations to treasure. She placed the box on the table between them. Dong-wook-ah, when you chose business over family tradition, I saw my own rebellion. When you choose love over corporate success, I see my own regret. Her voice finally carried emotion, decades of suppressed longing, of choices that couldn't be unmade. I disowned you because you reminded me of everything I was too afraid to become. Tears ran down Maya's cheeks as she understood the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't just about her and Dong-wook. This was about generations of Korean families choosing duty over happiness, tradition over truth, social harmony over individual fulfillment. Are you saying, Dong-wook began, I am saying that I spent 47 years regretting the love I didn't fight for. I will not spend my remaining years regretting the love I didn't support. Madame Choi bowed her head toward Maya, a gesture of respect that defied every hierarchy in Korean culture. Miss Johnson, if you will have me, I would be honored to welcome you into our family. The words hit Maya like absolution. The woman who'd represented every obstacle to their love was offering acceptance, understanding, redemption for choices that had defined decades of regret. But more than that, Madame Choi continued, I want to make an offer. The Choi Foundation has significant resources. We could partner with your Lee Johnson Foundation, combine traditional Korean cultural preservation with international understanding. Make something beautiful from the pain we've all carried. Maya looked at Dong-wook, saw the joy and disbelief warring in his expression, understood that they were being offered not just acceptance but purpose, a way to transform their love story into something that could heal other broken connections between tradition and change. There's one condition, Madame Choi said. The wedding must be traditional Korean ceremony. I have been denied the opportunity to see my son married with proper family celebration. I will not be denied again. Maya laughed through her tears, understanding that she was being claimed, protected, welcomed into a family structure that had seemed impossible just hours before. I would be honored, Maya said, but I have one condition too. Madame Choi raised an eyebrow. James Morrison from Ohio. If he's still alive, if he's still single, you're going to write him a letter. The suggestion hung in the air like possibility itself. And for the first time in 25 years, Madame Choi smiled at the prospect of choosing love over fear. 6 months later, the Lee Johnson Foundation for International Cultural Understanding occupied a renovated hanok in Insadong, traditional architecture housing modern purpose. Maya stood in her office, their office, reviewing applications from Korean students seeking study abroad opportunities and American artists wanting residencies in Seoul. Through the window, she could see Dong-wook in the courtyard garden, speaking with a group of high school students about the importance of cultural exchange. He wore simple clothes, jeans, button-down shirt, the same outfit from their first meeting, and looked happier than she'd ever seen him. The foundation had exceeded every expectation. International media coverage of their love story had generated donations from around the world, corporate partnerships with companies that wanted to associate with authentic cross-cultural connection, and support from Korean families who were navigating their own intercultural relationships. Park Sung-min had been quietly absorbed into a larger corporation after his vendetta against Dong-wook backfired spectacularly. The Korean public, it turned out, was more ready for change than anyone had anticipated. Their love story became a catalyst for conversations about tradition versus progress, about what it meant to be Korean in a global society, about whether love really did transcend cultural boundaries. Maya, see? Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway, still adjusting his glasses when he was nervous. The wedding planner is here for the final fitting discussion. Maya laughed. After 6 months in Korea, she'd learned that final was a flexible concept when it came to traditional Korean weddings. Madame Choi was determined to create the most beautiful, most meaningful, most perfectly orchestrated ceremony in Seoul's recent memory. And, Ji-hoon added with barely contained excitement, there's someone here to see Madame Choi. Through the office window, Maya watched an elderly American man walk slowly through the foundation's front gate. He moved with the careful dignity of someone in his 70s, wore a simple suit that had seen better years, and carried a small bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd been chosen with tremendous care. James Morrison from Ohio had received Madame Choi's letter after 47 years of silence. Maya watched Madame Choi emerge from the main building, saw the moment when two people who'd loved each other across impossible distances and decades of regret recognized each other despite the years that had changed everything except their essential selves. The conversation was too far away to overhear, but Maya could see the tears, the tentative smiles, the way they stood close enough to touch but far enough apart to respect the magnitude of the moment. Two people getting a second chance at the love they'd been too afraid to fight for the first time. Some stories, Maya whispered to herself, are worth waiting for. That evening, as Maya and Dong-wook walked through Myeongdong, the same streets where they'd first collided, she thought about the architecture of love. How relationships were built on foundations that had to be strong enough to support not just two people, but the weight of families, cultures, societies, histories that extended far beyond any individual romance. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, as they stopped at the crosswalk where they'd first met. Giving up the empire for love? Dong-wook considered the question seriously. "I regret how long it took me to understand that an empire without love is just an expensive prison. But no, Maya. I've never regretted choosing you." They kissed at the crosswalk where their story began, surrounded by Seoul's neon lights and the constant motion of a city that was learning to balance tradition with change. Tourists walked past, some recognizing them from the international media coverage, others simply seeing two people in love in one of the world's great cities. At 47, Lee Dong-wook had discovered that his fortune meant nothing compared to the wealth of genuine connection. At 38, Maya Johnson had learned that the heart's architecture could be rebuilt stronger after being broken, that love was possible across any distance if both people were brave enough to build bridges instead of walls. Their foundation would go on to support thousands of international students, to facilitate cultural exchanges that changed how Korea viewed itself in relation to the world, to prove that love really could transcend social barriers when people were willing to fight for understanding instead of surrendering to fear. But on that night, walking through the streets where they'd first found each other, Maya and Dong-wook were simply two people who discovered that some collisions are really invitations to build something beautiful together. The story that began with a billionaire's emptiness and an architect's heartbreak had become a foundation for healing not just their own wounds, but the cultural divisions that kept people afraid of loving across difference. And sometimes, the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to let other people's fears define the limits of your own heart. If you found yourself believing in love that transcends all boundaries and wanting to see more stories about couples who dare to love boldly across cultures, subscribe to our channel for tales of romance that prove the heart truly knows no limits. Because the most beautiful love stories are the ones that remind us all what's possible when we choose courage over comfort.